The marble floors of the Lombardi mansion gleamed under my practiced hands, each stroke of the cloth erasing another day's worth of footprints, cigar ash, and secrets. 4 years I'd worked here. 4 years of seeing everything and saying nothing. Because in Cesare Lombardi's world, silence wasn't just golden, it was survival. I wrung out my cleaning cloth into the bucket, the water already gray from polishing the entrance hall's black marble. The morning sun filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across the foyer, where I'd found bloodstains more than once. Those mornings, I cleaned faster, asked no questions, and made sure my hands didn't shake. Ottavia, the study needs attention before tonight's dinner. Mrs. Violetta appeared in the doorway, her silver hair pulled into its usual severe bun. She'd been the head housekeeper here for 20 years, had seen 3 generations of Lombardis rule Detroit's underworld from this mansion. Mr. Lombardi is particular about everything being perfect when he conducts business. Yes, ma'am. I gathered my supplies, already mentally preparing for the study. Cesare's inner sanctum, where deals were made and fates were sealed. I'd cleaned that room 1,000 times, had learned to move around the men in expensive suits like I was smoke, insubstantial and forgettable. The study was on the 2nd floor, down a hallway lined with portraits of dead Lombardis, all of them staring with the same hard eyes that Cesare had inherited. I knocked softly before entering, though I knew he was out. He always was at this hour, meeting with his captains at the warehouse on the east side. The room smelled of leather and tobacco, with undertones of the expensive whiskey Cesare favored. His massive mahogany desk dominated the space, its surface clear except for a crystal tumbler and a folder of papers. I started with the bookshelves, dusting each volume carefully. Most were in Italian, some so old their spines cracked if you breathed on them wrong. I'd taught myself to read Italian over the years, piece by piece, from the scraps of conversation I overheard and the books I dusted. My mother thought I cleaned houses because I had no ambition. She didn't understand that I'd chosen this carefully. Invisible work in a powerful place, where I could learn, where I could wait for something, though I wasn't sure what. The door opened without warning. I turned, cloth in hand, to find Cesare Lombardi standing in the doorway. He was 45, with dark hair silvering at the temples, a strong angular face that might have been handsome, if it wasn't so often hard with calculation, or cold with fury. He wore a charcoal suit tailored to emphasize his broad shoulders, and when his steel-gray eyes fixed on me, I felt that familiar flutter of fear mixed with something else I refused to name. Sir, I lowered my gaze respectfully. I can return later if you need the room. No. He moved to the desk, shrugging out of his suit jacket. Continue. I have work to do. I resumed dusting, hyper-aware of his presence as he settled into the leather chair behind his desk. The room felt smaller suddenly, the air heavier. I'd been alone with him before, but usually, he barely acknowledged my existence. Today, I could feel his gaze following my movements. How long have you worked here, Ottavia? The question startled me so much I nearly dropped my cloth. 4 years, sir. And in those 4 years, have you ever spoken out of turn? Repeated something you heard in this house? My heart began to race. Had someone accused me of something? Had I been careless? Let something slip? No, sir. Never. He studied me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Good. That's why you're still here. Discretion is a rare quality. I nodded, not trusting my voice. He returned his attention to the papers on his desk, and I finished my work in silence, every nerve ending aware of him, of the power he held, of how easily he could make people disappear. As I gathered my supplies to leave, he spoke again without looking up. The dinner tonight, 12 guests. Make sure the dining room is impeccable. These are important men. Yes, sir. I slipped out of the study, my hands trembling slightly as I closed the door behind me. Important men. In Cesare's world, that meant dangerous men. Men who controlled territories, moved shipments, collected debts. Men who made decisions over expensive wine that left bodies in the river by morning. The rest of the day passed in preparation. Violetta directed the staff with military precision. Fresh flowers for the table, the good china, crystal glasses polished until they sparkled. The chef arrived at 3 to begin preparing the meal, filling the kitchen with the scents of garlic, basil, and roasting meat. I was assigned to serve during dinner, along with 2 other girls. We wore simple black dresses with white aprons, our hair pulled back, our faces blank. The perfect servants, present but invisible, there to fill glasses and clear plates without disturbing the flow of conversation. The guests began arriving at 7. I watched from the hallway as they were shown in, each one a study in expensive tailoring and barely concealed violence. I recognized some from previous dinners. Stefano Barbieri, one of Cesare's most trusted captains, a man whose loyalty was legendary. Others were new faces, including a lawyer in a suit that probably cost more than my mother's rent for a year. "That's Marcello Greco," Violetta whispered as we waited to begin serving. "The family's attorney. Handles all the legal matters, keeps everything looking legitimate." I studied him, mid-50s, silver-haired, with a practiced smile that never reached his eyes. Something about him made my skin crawl, though I couldn't say why. Dinner began precisely at 8. I moved through the room with a tray of appetizers, offering them with a slight nod, my gaze never quite meeting anyone's eyes. The conversation flowed around me, a mixture of Italian and English, business talk disguised as casual discussion. "The new territory arrangement," Cesare was saying, his voice carrying the quiet authority that made men twice his size defer to him. "Greco has prepared the contracts. Once we sign tonight, the consolidation will be complete." I circled the table, filling wine glasses, clearing plates, blending into the background. But I listened. I always listened. It was the only power I had in this world. Knowledge that I hoarded like a dragon guard's gold, never knowing when a scrap of overheard conversation might prove valuable. "The terms are favorable to all parties," Greco said smoothly, pulling a document from his briefcase. "I've reviewed every clause personally. This partnership will make you all very wealthy men." I was refilling Cesare's water glass when something caught my eye. Greco had laid the contract on the table, and from my angle, I could see the text clearly. My eyes, trained from 4 years of reading Italian documents while dusting them, scanned the page almost unconsciously. And then I saw it. A single word, buried in paragraph 12 of the dense legal text. Where it should have said herederos, heirs, it instead said successores, successors. My hand froze on the water pitcher. The difference seemed small, but I'd read enough of Cesare's legal documents while cleaning to know it was catastrophic. Heirs meant bloodline, family. Successors meant anyone designated, anyone at all. If Cesare signed this contract without legitimate children, his entire empire wouldn't pass to his family. It would go to whoever these successors were. Almost certainly the other men at this table, the ones smiling and raising their glasses, celebrating a deal that would make them rich on Cesare's death. I glanced at Greco, saw the slight sheen of sweat on his forehead despite the cool air, the way his fingers trembled almost imperceptibly as he slid the contract toward Cesare. This was a trap, an assassination by paperwork, slow and legal and devastating. Cesare reached for the pen. I had perhaps 3 seconds to decide. Stay silent, stay safe, stay invisible like I'd always done. Or speak up and risk everything, my job, possibly my life, certainly my comfortable anonymity. The pen touched the paper. "Sir." The word escaped me before I could stop it. Every head at the table turned to stare at me, this servant who dared to interrupt. I saw Greco's face flush with anger, saw Stefano's hand move instinctively toward his jacket where I knew he kept a gun. Cesare's eyes met mine, and in them, I saw a question and a warning. This had better be important. "Forgive me," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "There's a spill in the kitchen. The chef needs your immediate approval on the substitution for the main course." It was a terrible lie, transparent and foolish. But Cesare was intelligent enough to hear what I wasn't saying, that I needed to speak with him privately, urgently, away from these men. For a moment, I thought he would dismiss me, would sign the contract and seal his fate. Then he set down the pen. "Gentlemen, excuse me. My chef is temperamental about approvals." He stood, straightening his cuffs. "Greco, leave the contract. I'll review it once more before signing. One can never be too careful with legal documents." I saw Greco's jaw tighten, saw the flash of something dark in his eyes, before he masked it with a professional smile. Of course, due diligence is always wise. I led Cesare through the dining room toward the kitchen, my heart hammering against my ribs. I'd just put myself in the middle of something dangerous, had made myself visible in a world where invisibility was safety. Once we were alone in the hallway, Cesare gripped my arm, not hard enough to hurt, but firm enough to convey his displeasure. "This had better be life or death, Ottavia." "It is." I met his gaze directly for the first time in 4 years. "The contract, paragraph 12. The word should be herederos, but it says successores." I watched his expression shift from anger to confusion to cold understanding. He released my arm. "You read Italian?" "Enough. I've been dusting your documents for 4 years, sir. I know what they should say." He stared at me as though seeing me for the first time. This invisible woman who'd served his meals and cleaned his floors, who'd apparently been quietly reading his private papers and teaching herself the language of his empire. "Show me." We returned to the dining room where the guests were making uncomfortable small talk, the contract still lying on the table. Cesare picked it up, scanning the page I'd indicated. I saw the exact moment he found it, saw his hands tighten on the paper, saw the muscle in his jaw clench. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice dangerously soft. "There appears to be an error in the contract. Greco, you'll need to prepare a revised version." Greco stood, his face pale. "An error? I reviewed every word personally. Paragraph 12. The term is incorrect." Cesare's eyes were chips of ice. "Unless you can explain why my heirs would be replaced by successors of your choosing?" The room went deadly silent. I saw Stefano's hand slide fully into his jacket now, saw the other captains exchange glances, saw Greco's calculated mask slip to reveal the panic beneath. "A typo," Greco stammered. "An unfortunate typo. Nothing more. A typo that would have transferred control of my organization to everyone in this room upon my death." Cesare set the contract down with deliberate care. How convenient. I backed toward the wall, trying to become invisible again, but it was too late. Greco's eyes fixed on me with pure hatred. I'd exposed his plot, had ruined whatever scheme he and the others had planned. "Who's going to tell me?" Cesare said quietly, the quietness more terrifying than any shout. "How many of you were part of this?" The silence stretched. Then Stefano spoke, his voice firm. "Not me, boss. I swear on my children's lives." "Nor I," another captain added quickly. "I never saw that contract before tonight." One by one, the men denied involvement, until only Greco remained silent, his face ashen. "It seems," Cesare said, his gaze never leaving the lawyer, "that someone thought I'd sign without reading. Thought I'd be too trusting of my own attorney to verify the terms." He smiled, a predator's smile. "They were almost right, if not for my very observant maid." He looked at me then, and I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Respect, maybe, or recognition. Thank you, Ottavia. You may have just saved my empire. I just read what was there, sir. Most people see without observing. You did both. He turned back to Greco. Stefano, take our friend to the wine cellar. I'll join you shortly to discuss his career change. Stefano moved with frightening efficiency, gripping Greco's arm and leading him from the room. The other guests rose uneasily, making excuses about early mornings and previous engagements. Within minutes, the dining room had emptied except for Cesare and me. 4 years, he said softly, studying me as though I were a puzzle he'd only just noticed. 4 years you've been in my house, and I never once asked your full name. Ottavia Ricci, sir. Do you have family, Ottavia Ricci? My mother. She lives in Riverside. He nodded slowly. And you learned Italian how? Night classes? Books, conversations, your library. I gestured vaguely toward the study. I'm alone in these rooms for hours every day. I read while I clean. My private papers, my family documents. Yes, sir. I waited for his anger, for the accusation of spying or theft. Instead, he laughed, a genuine sound of surprise and something almost like delight. 4 years of a spy in my own house, and she turns out to be my savior. He shook his head. Life has a sense of humor. I'm not a spy, sir. I never repeated anything I read, never told anyone. I know. He cut me off. If you were a spy, Greco would have known about you, would have made sure you weren't in the room tonight. No, you're something rarer. Someone who sees everything and keeps it to herself. He moved closer, and I fought the urge to step back. This close, I could smell his cologne, see the fine lines around his eyes, the silver threading through his dark hair. He was a dangerous man, a violent man, but in this moment, he looked almost human. I'm going to ask you something, Ottavia, and I need absolute honesty. Can you give me that? Yes, sir. In 4 years of reading my papers, cleaning my rooms, overhearing my conversations, what have you learned about my business? The question was a trap and a test. I chose my words carefully. That you control the docks, the trucking unions, and half the city council. That you move goods that don't appear on any manifest. That you have rules about drugs. You won't touch them. Won't let anyone in your organization deal them. That family loyalty matters more to you than money. That you're feared, but also respected, because you keep your word, and you protect those under your care. His eyes widened slightly. You've been paying attention. It's my job to be invisible, sir. People forget I'm there. They talk freely. And you never thought to sell this information? To the police? To my rivals? No, sir. Why not? I considered the question honestly. Because this job pays well enough to support my mother. Because you've never been cruel to the staff. Because I saw what happened to people who cross you, and I'm not stupid. I paused. And because everyone here chose this life. Your men, your business partners. They knew what they were getting into. It's not my place to judge or interfere. Until tonight. Tonight was different. You didn't know. You were about to be cheated. And I stopped, unsure how to explain. And what, Ottavia? And it wasn't right. For all that you are, for all that you do, you've never lied to anyone here. You don't pretend to be something you're not. Greco was betraying that, was using your trust against you. That felt wrong. Cesare studied me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone, sending a quick text. I'm having Stefano assign someone to watch your mother's building tonight. Greco has allies, and they'll know by morning what you did. Fear spiked through me. I didn't think, of course you didn't. You acted on instinct, did the right thing without calculating the cost. That's admirable and dangerous in equal measure. He slid his phone back into his pocket. You can't go home tonight, Ottavia. Possibly not for several days until I've dealt with everyone involved in this plot. Where should I go? You'll stay here. In the guest wing, 3rd floor. Violetta will help you settle in. Sir, I can't. Yes, you can. You saved my empire tonight. The least I can do is ensure you survive to see morning. His voice softened slightly. I protect what's mine, Ottavia, and as of tonight, you're under my protection, whether you want it or not. I opened my mouth to argue, then closed it. He was right. I'd made myself a target the moment I'd spoken up. Whatever happened next, I was part of it now, no longer invisible, no longer safe in my anonymity. Thank you, sir. Don't thank me yet. We need to find out how deep this conspiracy goes. Who else was involved? That means I'll have questions for you, lots of them, about things you've seen and heard over the years. His gaze intensified. Can I count on your memory, Ottavia? On everything you've been silently observing all this time? I thought of the 4 years of carefully hoarded knowledge. Every overheard conversation. Every document I'd read while dusting. Every visitor I'd noted. A catalog of secrets I'd never expected to use. Yes, sir. You can count on me. For the first time since I'd met him, Cesare Lombardi smiled at me. Not the predator smile he'd given Greco, but something almost warm. Good. Because I have a feeling, Ottavia Ricci, that you're about to become the most valuable asset in my organization, and the most dangerous. The guest room on the 3rd floor was larger than my entire apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the grounds, plush carpet absorbed sound like snow, and the bed was dressed in linens that probably cost more than my monthly salary. Violetta had brought me a nightgown and toiletries, her weathered face creased with concern. 4 years I've known you, she said, setting fresh towels on the dresser. Quiet, reliable Ottavia who never caused trouble. And now this. I didn't mean to cause trouble. No, you meant to save him. She turned to look at me, her stern expression softening slightly. That was brave. Foolish, but brave. Mr. Lombardi doesn't forget loyalty, but he also doesn't forget those who see too much. Am I in danger from him? Violetta considered the question carefully. Not in the way you're thinking. Cesare Lombardi is many things, but he's not a monster to those who serve him faithfully. He takes care of his own. She paused at the door. But you're in his world now, child. Really in it, not just cleaning its edges. That's a different kind of danger. After she left, I stood at the window, watching the grounds. Security lights illuminated the perimeter, and I could see armed men patrolling in pairs. How had I never noticed the scope of it before? The cameras, the guards, the careful choreography of protection that surrounded Cesare Lombardi every moment of his life. I couldn't sleep. My mind replayed the evening, Greco's face when I'd interrupted, the moment Cesare had understood the trap, the cold fury in his eyes when he'd sent the lawyer to the wine cellar. What was happening down there now? I'd heard whispers about the wine cellar, about how some people went down those stairs and never came back up. A soft knock at my door made me jump. I opened it to find Stefano, his bulk filling the doorway. Despite his size and the gun I knew he carried, his face was kind. Boss wants to see you. Study. My stomach clenched. Now? It's nearly midnight. He doesn't sleep much. Says he has questions. Stefano's expression was unreadable. I'd bring a notebook if I were you. He's in that mood where he wants details. I grabbed a pad of paper from the desk and followed him through the silent mansion. The study door was ajar, warm light spilling into the hallway. Stefano knocked once, then gestured for me to enter. Cesare stood by the window, a tumbler of whiskey in his hand, his jacket discarded and shirt sleeves rolled up. He looked tired, older than his 45 years, the weight of the evening evident in the set of his shoulders. Sit. He gestured to one of the leather chairs. "We need to talk." I perched on the edge of the seat, the notebook clutched in my hands. He settled behind his desk, studying me over the rim of his glass. "Greco is dead." The blunt statement hit me like a physical blow. I'd known it was possible, even likely, but hearing it confirmed made it real. "I see. Does that bother you?" I thought about his question honestly. "I don't know. He tried to steal your empire, to cheat you. But I've never known someone who died because of something I did. He didn't die because of you. He died because he betrayed me, because he conspired with my enemies, because he thought I was stupid enough to sign a contract without reading it." Cesare set down his glass with deliberate care. "You simply revealed the truth. What I did with that truth is on me, not you. That's a fine distinction, sir." "Perhaps, but it's an important one, especially for what comes next." He leaned forward, fingers steepled. "Greco didn't work alone. The contract was too sophisticated, the timing too precise. Someone fed him information, told him when to present it, assured him I'd be too distracted to notice the change." "You think there's another traitor?" "I know there is. Probably several." His eyes were hard. "And you're going to help me find them." "Sir, I don't know how." 4 years, Ottavia. 4 years of being invisible, of listening, of observing. I need you to remember everything. Every conversation you overheard, every visitor who seemed nervous, every paper you dusted that had unusual names or numbers. His voice was intense, urgent. Somewhere in all that information is the pattern we need. I opened the notebook, my hand steadier than I felt. "Where do you want me to start?" "Start with the dining room tonight. Besides Greco, who looked surprised when I caught the error." I closed my eyes, pulling up the memory. The moment I'd spoken, every face at that table turning toward me. Councilman Torres. He went pale, like he'd seen a ghost. And Franco Russo, the one who controls the trucking union. His hand went to his pocket, like he was reaching for his phone. Good. Who didn't look surprised? Stefano. He just looked confused, then angry when he understood what had happened. Giovanni Mancini looked confused too, kept glancing between you and Greco like he was trying to understand. Cesare made notes on his own pad. "That matches my read. Stefano and Giovanni are clear. Torres and Russo are suspects." He looked up. "What about before tonight? Have you ever seen Greco meeting privately with anyone in the house?" I thought back through 4 years of cleaning, of moving through rooms while important men conducted business. 3 months ago, I was cleaning the library. Greco and Russo were there. I thought they were discussing union contracts, but... I paused, remembering. But what? Russo said something like, "When the transition happens, we'll need to move fast." And Greco said, "Patience. These things take time to arrange properly." I met Cesare's gaze. At the time, I thought they meant transitioning to a new contract with the union. But now it sounds like they were planning for my removal. His jaw clenched. What else? For the next 2 hours, I dug through my memories, pulling out every scrap of conversation, every suspicious meeting, every detail I'd absorbed while being invisible. Cesare listened intently, occasionally asking questions, building a picture of the conspiracy that had been forming right under his nose. "You have an extraordinary memory," he said finally, setting down his pen. "Most people see but don't observe. You do both. It's a survival skill, sir. When you're invisible, paying attention keeps you safe. You're not invisible anymore, Ottavia. That ship sailed the moment you spoke up tonight." He poured himself another whiskey, then offered me the decanter. I shook my head. The question now is what to do with you. What do you mean? I can't send you back to cleaning floors. You know too much. You've proven too valuable. But I also can't just promote you without explanation. It would raise questions, make you a target. I'm already a target, aren't I? Because of tonight. Yes. Which is why you're staying in this house under my protection, until we've eliminated everyone involved in Greco's plot. He studied me over his glass. But after that, we need a role for you that makes sense, that explains your sudden proximity to me without revealing what you really are. And what am I really? Cesare smiled slightly. My eyes and ears. The person who sees what I miss, who remembers what I forget. The invisible woman who became indispensable in a single evening. A chill ran through me at his words. Indispensable to a man like Cesare Lombardi was both protection and prison. What kind of role are you thinking? I'm not sure yet. Personal assistant, perhaps, or... He broke off as his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, his expression darkening. Russo just left the city. Private plane to Mexico. Someone warned him. How? No one knew about tonight except... I stopped, understanding dawning. Except everyone at that table. And everyone they might have called afterward. Cesare was already typing on his phone. Stefano, track Russo's plane. I want to know where it lands. He looked at me. This is what I mean, Ottavia. The moment word gets out that I caught Greco, everyone involved will scatter. We have maybe 12 hours to identify them all before they disappear. Then we work through the night. He raised an eyebrow. You should rest. You've had a traumatic evening. So have you, sir. And I suspect you're not planning to sleep. I met his gaze steadily. Besides, my memory is freshest now. Give me names, and I'll tell you everything I remember about them. For a long moment, he simply looked at me, as though seeing me anew. Then he nodded. All right. Let's start with the city council. You said Torres looked guilty. Who else on the council has been in this house? We worked through the night, mapping out connections I'd observed over 4 years, building a web of conspiracy that was far larger than either of us had imagined. By dawn, we had a list of 15 names, men who'd been positioned to take over pieces of Cesare's empire once the contract transferred control. This is everyone, Cesare asked, staring at the list. Everyone I'm certain about. There might be others, people I didn't see or who were careful about not meeting here. 15 men. His voice was soft, dangerous. 15 people I trusted, fed, paid, protected. And they were planning to carve up my organization like a holiday turkey. I watched the play of emotions across his face. Fury, yes, but also something that looked like hurt. For all his power and violence, Cesare Lombardi valued loyalty above all else. This betrayal cut deep. What will you do? What I always do. Eliminate threats. Protect what's mine. His eyes met mine. But carefully. If I move too fast, the ones I miss will go underground, and I'll spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder. I need proof first. Evidence that will force them to face me, to make their move where I can see it. How do you get that proof? I was hoping you might have an idea. You're the one who sees patterns I miss. I considered the problem, thinking through what I'd learned about his world over 4 years. The contract. Greco drafted it. But someone had to tell him the specific language to use, had to explain what would give them maximum control. That person probably has their own copy, their own version with notes or changes. Cesare leaned back in his chair, a slow smile spreading across his face. You think like a criminal, Ottavia. I've been watching criminals for 4 years, sir. It rubs off. So, we find that source document. which means we need to search the homes or offices of everyone on this list without them knowing. His smile faded. That's a week's work at least, maybe more. And every day that passes gives them time to prepare, to hide evidence, to disappear like Russo did. Unless... An idea was forming, dangerous but possible. Unless you give them a reason to relax, to think they're safe. I'm listening. What if Greco's death looked like an accident? A heart attack during the dinner party. Tragic, but not suspicious. You're devastated, of course, by the loss of your trusted attorney. The contract was flawed because poor Greco was overworked. Made a simple typo. You'll have a new lawyer review everything before signing, but there's no rush, no suspicion. Understanding lit Cesare's eyes. They think I didn't notice the trap. They think they still have time to regroup, to try again with a different approach. Exactly. And while they're regrouping, your people search their properties, find the evidence you need. It could work. He was already reaching for his phone. But it requires perfect execution. One slip, one person who knows Greco didn't die of natural causes, and the whole thing falls apart. Who knows the truth now? You, me, Stefano, and Giovanni. He helped dispose of the body. Can you trust them to keep silent? With my life. But I can't trust the staff, can't trust anyone else who was in the house tonight. His gaze fixed on me. Which means you'll need to sell the story. You were there. You can be the witness who saw Greco clutch his chest, who called for help, who was distraught when he died. And the enormity of what he was asking settled over me. You want me to lie to everyone, to pretend I watched a man die of natural causes. I want you to protect yourself and everyone else in this house by convincing the conspirators that their plot is still secret. His voice softened. I'm asking a lot, I know. More than any maid should be asked. But you're not just a maid anymore, Ottavia. Not after tonight. He was right. The moment I'd spoken up, I'd stepped out of invisibility into something far more dangerous and complex. There was no going back to quietly dusting furniture and keeping my knowledge to myself. All right, I'll do it. But sir, I hesitated, then forged ahead. My mother. If people come asking questions, if they think I know something, I'll have someone watching her building 24/7. Armed protection, the best I have. He pulled a card from his desk drawer, writing a number on it. And give her this. Tell her if anyone approaches her, anyone at all, she calls this number immediately. They'll extract her to a safe house within minutes. I took the card, relief flooding through me. Thank you. Don't thank me. You've earned it, earned more than you know. He stood, rolling down his shirt sleeves. It's almost 6. The staff will arrive soon. We need to stage this before then. Stage what? The scene of Greco's heart attack. Stefano brought the body back from the wine cellar. We'll put him in the dining room, make it look like he collapsed there during dinner cleanup. My stomach churned at the clinical way he discussed moving a corpse. And if the police investigate? The medical examiner is on my payroll. He'll confirm heart attack, sign off on natural causes. Cesare's expression was matter of fact. This isn't my first time managing an unfortunate death, Ottavia. I know how these things work. The reminder of exactly who I was dealing with sent a chill through me. For all our hours of conversation, all the grudging respect I'd seen in his eyes, Cesare Lombardi was still a man who killed people and arranged cover-ups with the ease of someone ordering breakfast. Come on, he said, noting my expression. I'll spare you the actual staging, but you'll need to see the scene to know what you're supposed to have witnessed. I followed him through the silent mansion to the dining room. Stefano was there, and true to Cesare's word, I was spared the actual moving of the body. When they were finished, Greco lay slumped in one of the dining chairs, his face peaceful, a wine glass overturned beside him as though he'd knocked it in his collapse. You were clearing the table, Cesare instructed quietly. He was sitting here, reviewing papers. He gasped, clutched his chest. You called for help, but by the time Stefano arrived, he was gone. Understood? Yes, sir. Good. Now go clean yourself up. Change into your uniform. In an hour, you'll need to be hysterical, shocked. Can you do that? I looked at the body of the man who'd tried to destroy Cesare, who'd been willing to steal an empire through careful legal manipulation. I can do that. As I left the dining room, I heard Stefano say quietly to Cesare, "That's quite a woman, boss. Smart, steady under pressure. Where'd you find her?" "She's been here for 4 years. I just never noticed until tonight." There was something in Cesare's voice I couldn't quite identify. Funny how the most valuable things can be right under your nose, and you never see them until the moment you need them most. I didn't hear Stefano's response. I was already climbing the stairs back to the guest room, my mind racing with everything that had happened, everything I'd agreed to do. In the space of a single evening, I'd transformed from invisible maid to co-conspirator, from observer to participant in a deadly game. And the most terrifying part? Some small, secret part of me was exhilarated by it all. The performance began at 7:30, when the morning staff arrived. I'd changed back into my uniform, splashed cold water on my face to make my eyes red, and waited in the hallway near the dining room. When Violetta rounded the corner with her clipboard, I let out a convincing sob. "Ottavia, what's wrong?" She rushed to my side, genuine concern creasing her weathered face. "It's Mr. Greco," I managed, my voice breaking. He collapsed last night after dinner. I think he's dead." The chaos that followed was grimly orchestrated. Violetta called for Cesare, who appeared with Stefano, both of them playing their roles perfectly. Shock, attempts at resuscitation, the eventual grim acceptance. The medical examiner arrived within the hour, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses who spent exactly 12 minutes examining the body before signing off on cardiac arrest. "Tragic," he pronounced, snapping his medical bag shut. "But not uncommon in men his age who work high-stress positions. My condolences, Mr. Lombardi." I watched from the doorway as they carried Greco's body out in a discreet black bag. The other staff whispered among themselves, and I caught fragments of their speculation. The stress of legal work, his recent divorce. Had anyone noticed him looking unwell at dinner? "Ottavia." Cesare's voice was gentle as he approached me in the hallway. For the benefit of the staff, he placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. "I know this must have been traumatic. Take the rest of the day to recover." "Thank you, sir." I kept my eyes downcast, playing the shaken witness. I just keep seeing him fall, the way he grabbed his chest. "Shh. It's over now. Why don't you rest in the guest room? Violetta will bring you tea." I nodded and retreated upstairs, aware of the sympathetic looks from the other maids. Once alone in the guest room, I allowed myself to breathe normally. The performance had worked. Now came the waiting. Over the next 3 days, I lived in a strange limbo. Officially, I was recovering from the shock of witnessing Greco's death. Unofficially, I was helping Cesare coordinate the search of 15 different properties. He'd set up a command center in his private study, where Stefano and Giovanni fed him updates every few hours. "Torres's office. Clean," Stefano reported on day 2. "No unusual documents. No copies of modified contracts. Either he's innocent or he's very careful." "Keep looking." Cesare made a notation on his ever-growing chart. "What about Russo's house in the city?" "Still searching. But boss..." Stefano hesitated. His wife is asking questions. She knows something's wrong, knows he left in a hurry. Stall her. Tell her we're conducting an audit, that everyone's property is being reviewed for tax purposes. Cesare glanced at me. "Ottavia, Did you ever see Russo's wife here? I thought back through my mental catalog. Twice, both times for charity events. She seemed nervous around you, kept her distance, but I paused, remembering. The second time, she spent a long time in the powder room. I went to restock supplies and found her on the phone, speaking quickly in Spanish. She hung up when she saw me. When was this? 6 weeks ago. The Cancer Research Gala. Cesare's eyes sharpened. What did she say before she saw you? I closed my eyes, pulling up the memory. Something like, "Ya casi está listo," it's almost ready. And then, "Él no sospecha nada." He suspects nothing. She was reporting to someone. Cesare looked at Stefano. Search Russo's wife next. Office, car, wherever she spends time. She's either part of the conspiracy, or she knows more than she should. The search of Isabella Russo's car proved fruitful. Hidden beneath the spare tire was a folder containing copies of modified contracts. Not just the one Greco had presented, but variations, each one designed to transfer different pieces of Cesare's empire to different conspirators. 15 contracts, Giovanni reported, spreading them across Cesare's desk. One for each name on your list. They weren't just planning to take over. They were dividing everything in advance. I studied the documents, my years of reading Cesare's papers making the legalese clear. They were thorough. Shipping to Russo, the unions to Torres, the construction companies to someone named De Luca. Carmine De Luca. Cesare's voice was ice. My cousin. My own blood was part of this. The betrayal hit him visibly. I saw his hands clench, saw the muscle in his jaw jump. For a moment, I glimpsed the fury that made men fear him, the cold rage that had built his empire. "Boss," Stefano began. "Get out. Both of you. I need a moment." They left quickly. I moved to follow, but Cesare's voice stopped me. "Not you, Ottavia. Stay." I turned to find him staring at the contracts, his expression a mask that barely contained the storm beneath. "My cousin," he said softly. "My father's sister's son. I brought him into the business, taught him everything, treated him like a brother." "I'm sorry, sir." "Are you? Or are you thinking that this is what happens in my world, that betrayal is simply the cost of doing business?" The question was sharp, probing. I chose my words carefully. "I'm thinking that you trusted the wrong people, that you valued loyalty more than they did, that it hurts, whether you're a businessman or a mob boss, when family turns on you." He looked at me then, really looked at me. "You understand. My father left when I was 8, ran off with my mother's sister." I shrugged. "Family betrayal isn't unique to your world, sir. It just has different consequences." Something in his face softened. "What happened to them?" My mother never spoke to either of them again. Last I heard, they were in Nevada. But that was years ago. I moved closer to the desk, studying the contracts. These are dated 3 months ago. They've been planning this for a while. Which means they'll have backup plans, contingencies if the contract approach failed. Cesare began pacing, his mind visibly working through scenarios. Greco's death might convince them to pause, but it won't stop them. They've invested too much, planned too carefully. "Then we need to draw them out," I said. "Make them think they have another opportunity, one too good to resist." He stopped pacing. "What are you thinking? You need a new lawyer to replace Greco, someone to handle the consolidation contracts. What if you announced you're interviewing candidates, that you want the deal moving forward despite the tragedy? They'd see it as their second chance." Understanding dawned in his eyes. "They'd try to plant their own candidate, someone they control." "Exactly. And we'd know which candidates are legitimate and which ones are trying to continue the conspiracy." Cesare smiled, the expression predatory and approving. "You have a devious mind, Ottavia Ricci. I'm beginning to think you were wasted on housekeeping. I prefer to think of it as a learning opportunity, sir. Over the next week, the plan unfolded. Cesare let it be known through his network that he was seeking Greco's replacement, someone skilled in corporate law and complex negotiations. Applications flooded in, legitimate attorneys seeking the prestige and pay of representing the Lombardi organization, and at least 3 candidates that our research revealed were connected to the conspirators. Anthony Marino, I read from his application. Recommended by Councilman Torres, previously worked with Greco on several matters. That's our plant. Cesare marked the file. Torres wouldn't recommend someone unless he controlled them. Who else? Richard Chen. Recommended by... I paused. No one. Self-submitted, but his previous clients include Carmine DeLuca and Franco Russo. 2 for 2. Anyone else suspicious? I flipped through the remaining applications. Sarah Petrov, new to the city, limited local connections, but she's worked with international shipping companies, the kind that might be moving goods off manifest. So, 3 candidates who are likely compromised. Cesare leaned back in his chair. We interview all of them, see which one pushes hardest for the consolidation contract. That's our entry point. The interviews were held in Cesare's study over 3 days. I attended each one, ostensibly to take notes, but really to observe and listen. Anthony Marino was smooth, too smooth. His answers rehearsed and his interest in the consolidation contract immediate. Richard Chen was quieter, more calculated, asking pointed questions about the timeline and Cesare's plans for succession. But it was Sarah Petrov who surprised us. She was younger than I expected. Early 30s, with sharp eyes and a direct manner. She asked about the consolidation. Yes, but also about Cesare's long-term vision, his concerns about loyalty, his thoughts on family business versus corporate structure. She's good, I murmured to Cesare after she left. If she's working for them, she's playing a deeper game than the others. Agreed, which means we need more information on her. He was already texting Stefano. Background check, deep dive. I want to know everywhere she's been, everyone she's talked to, every case she's worked. The background check revealed something unexpected. Sarah Petrov's name was real, but her history had gaps. 6 months in Moscow, 2 years that showed no employment or tax records, a sealed juvenile record in New York. She was either very good at hiding her past, or someone had helped her create a new identity. She's not just a lawyer, Giovanni said, studying the report. She's something else. Maybe intelligence, maybe organized crime from another city. But she's not what she appears. I thought about her questions during the interview, the way she'd watched Cesare not with the nervousness of a job applicant, but with the assessment of an equal. What if she's investigating you? What if the conspirators brought in outside help to gather information? Then interviewing her was a mistake. Cesare's expression darkened. She's seen inside this house, met key people, asked questions that could compromise security. Or, I said slowly, an idea forming, we could use her. Give her information, but make it misleading. Let her report back to whoever sent her, thinking she's getting valuable intelligence when really we're feeding her exactly what we want the conspirators to know. Stefano whistled softly. Boss, your maid thinks like a spy. She's not a maid anymore. Cesare's gaze fixed on me. Ottavia, how would you feel about taking on a new role? Officially my personal assistant. Unofficially my strategic advisor. The offer hung in the air between us. Accepting meant fully entering his world, becoming part of the empire I'd only observed from the edges. Refusing meant retreating to invisibility, to safety, to the narrow life I'd known before. What would that entail, sir? Attending meetings, helping coordinate operations, using that remarkable memory and observational skill to identify problems before they become crises. He paused. Also danger. More than you've known so far. People will see you as an extension of me, which makes you both protected and targeted. And my mother. Permanent security, a better apartment if she wants it, paid for by the organization. She'd never know the details, just that you got promoted and can afford to help her more. I thought of my mother in her cramped Riverside apartment, worried about money, aging alone. Thought of the 4 years I'd spent invisible, safe but powerless. Thought of the exhilaration I'd felt these past days, being part of something larger, using my mind for more than memorizing cleaning schedules. I'll do it. But sir, I met his gaze directly. I need one thing clear. I'll help you identify threats, coordinate plans, use my skills to protect what's yours. But I won't hurt anyone. I won't be the one who pulls a trigger or gives an order that gets someone killed. For a long moment, Cesare studied me. Then he nodded. Agreed. You're my eyes and mind, not my weapon. I have plenty of people who can do violence. What I need from you is intelligence. Then we have a deal. He extended his hand across the desk. I shook it, his grip firm and warm. The moment felt significant, like I was signing a contract far more binding than any piece of paper. Well then, Miss Ricci, he said with a slight smile. Let's discuss your first official assignment. We need to figure out what to do about Sarah Petrov and her investigation. And we need to do it before the conspirators make their next move. As we bent over the files, planning strategy and contingencies, I was struck by the surreal nature of my new reality. A week ago, I'd been a maid worried about making rent. Now I was sitting across from one of the most powerful men in Detroit, helping him outmaneuver a conspiracy that had nearly destroyed his empire. And the strangest part? I was good at it. The years of invisible observation had trained me for exactly this, seeing patterns, remembering details, understanding the complex web of relationships and motivations that drove Cesare's world. Ottavia, he said at one point, looking up from the files. Why do you think Greco chose you to serve at that dinner? Of all the staff, why put you in the room when he presented the contract? I hadn't considered that. I don't know. I assumed it was random, or Violetta's decision. Nothing in my house is random, and Violetta doesn't make decisions about important dinners without clearing it with me first. His eyes narrowed. Someone specifically requested you be there. The question is who and why. A chill ran through me. You think they knew I could read Italian? That putting me in the room was deliberate? I think someone wanted insurance. If the contract worked, fine. If it didn't, if I somehow caught it, they'd need a scapegoat. His voice was grim. You were there. You can read the language. You had access to my papers. Easy to frame you as the one who altered the contract, who was working for my enemies. The realization hit like a physical blow. I was set up from the beginning, which means someone on that list knows more about you than they should, knows about your language skills, your habits, your movements in this house. Cesare stood, moving to the window. We've been assuming the conspiracy was about the contract, about taking over my organization. But what if it was more personal? What if someone wanted to hurt me by taking away the one person who might actually see the trap? But I was invisible. No one noticed me. Someone did. Someone noticed you enough to know you were a threat, even before you knew it yourself. He turned to face me, and that someone is still out there, still planning, still waiting for their next opportunity. The guest room felt less safe that night. I lay awake, thinking about Cesare's words, about the possibility that I'd been noticed long before I'd thought to speak up. Who had been watching me while I'd been watching them? A soft knock at my door made me sit up. Yes? It's Cesare. May I come in? I wrapped a robe over my nightgown and opened the door. He stood in the hallway, still dressed but with his tie loosened, looking tired and troubled. I couldn't sleep, he said. Kept thinking about what we discussed, about who might have been watching you. And? May I? He gestured to the sitting area in my room. I nodded, and we both settled into the chairs by the window, the city lights glittering beyond the glass. I went through the staff records, he said, looking for anyone hired in the last year, anyone with connections to the people on our list. And I found something odd. He handed me a file. Inside was a personnel form for a man named Thomas Chen, hired 8 months ago as a security guard, recommended by Richard Chen, one of the attorneys we'd interviewed. The lawyer's brother, I said, working security here. And assigned primarily to the second floor, where my study is, where you clean every day. Cesare's expression was dark. He'd have seen you coming and going, could have reported your movements, maybe even gone through your things to see if you'd taken any documents. Does he still work here? He quit 2 days ago, called in sick the day after Greco's heart attack, then sent a resignation email citing family emergency. Cesare's jaw tightened. Convenient timing. So, Richard Chen sent his brother to spy, to gather information about your security and your staff. And Thomas Chen noticed me, reported back that there was a maid who spent a lot of time in the study, who might be reading papers. And they decided to use you as insurance. Cesare finished. Either you'd fail to notice the contract change, which would help them, or you'd notice and speak up, which would make you look like a co-conspirator when everything came out. The elegant trap made me feel sick. They're smarter than we thought. Much smarter, which means we need to be smarter still. He leaned forward, his expression intense. Ottavia, I need to ask you something, and I need complete honesty. Is there anything at all, that they could use against you? Anything in your past that could make you look guilty? I thought about my quiet life, my 4 years of invisible service, my mother in Riverside. No, I've never stolen anything, never done anything illegal. The most rebellious thing I've ever done is read your private papers without permission. That's not rebellion, that's initiative. He smiled slightly. But it means they'll have to manufacture evidence if they want to frame you, which gives us an advantage. We can anticipate what they might fabricate and counter it before they deploy it. How? By building your own paper trail. Starting now, you're officially my personal assistant. Employment contract, salary increase, company credit card, all documented, all legitimate. If anyone tries to claim you were secretly working for my enemies, we'll have proof that I trusted you, promoted you, brought you into my inner circle. It made tactical sense, but something in his voice made me study his face more carefully. Is that the only reason? Just to protect against false accusations? For a moment he didn't answer. Then, no. It's also because you've proven yourself invaluable, because I trust your judgment, because... He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. Because in 1 week, you've shown me more loyalty and intelligence than people I've known for years. You saved my empire, Ottavia. The least I can do is make sure you're protected and compensated appropriately. The sincerity in his voice caught me off guard. I'd expected calculation, strategy, the cold pragmatism he showed in business. Instead, I heard something almost like gratitude, maybe even respect. Thank you, sir. Cesare, if you're going to be my personal assistant, you should use my first name. At least in private. Cesare. I tested the name. It felt strange on my tongue, intimate in a way that made me acutely aware of how alone we were, how quiet the mansion was at this hour. He stood, moving toward the door. Get some rest. Tomorrow we start building your new identity, and we set the trap for the Chen brothers and whoever else is involved in this conspiracy. Good night, Cesare. He paused at the door, looking back. You know, in all the years I've lived in this house, I never once asked a maid her opinion on anything important. Never thought to look beyond the uniform to the person beneath. His expression was rueful. I was a fool. Who knows how many other talented people I've overlooked? How many opportunities I've missed because I couldn't see past my own assumptions? You see now. That's what matters. Because you forced me to. If you'd stayed silent that night, if you'd remained invisible. He shook his head. Everything would be different. I'd probably be dead within a year, and 15 traitors would be dividing up everything I built. But you're not dead, and we're going to stop them. Yes, we are. He smiled, and for the first time since I'd met him, it reached his eyes. Good night, Octavia. Sleep well. After he left, I stood at the window, looking out at the grounds, at the security lights and patrolling guards, at the fortress of wealth and power that had become my new home. Somewhere out there, the conspirators were planning their next move, unaware that the invisible maid they'd tried to use as a pawn had instead become the queen on Cesare's chessboard. And this game was far from over. My mother's voice crackled with suspicion through the phone. Personal assistant? Octavia, you were cleaning floors last week? Now you're sitting in meetings with Mr. Lombardi? I perched on the edge of the guest room bed, trying to find words that would satisfy her without revealing the danger. I helped him catch an error in a contract. He was impressed, offered me a better position. What kind of error? Legal stuff, Mom. Nothing exciting. The lie tasted bitter, but the truth would terrify her. The point is, I got promoted. Better pay, better hours. I can help more with your rent now. A long pause. Then, in a softer voice, Are you safe, Mija? That man, the things people say about him. I'm safe, I promise. At least that wasn't entirely a lie. Under Cesare's protection, I was probably safer than I'd been in my entire life. And there's a security detail watching your building now. Just a precaution. But if anyone comes asking about me, you call this number immediately. I read off the emergency line Cesare had given me. Security? Octavia, what have you gotten yourself into? An opportunity, Mom. A chance to do something more than scrub floors. I softened my voice. Trust me. Please. She sighed, the sound heavy with worry and resignation. Your father used to say opportunity and danger were twins. Be careful which one you're really courting. After we hung up, I sat for a moment, her words echoing, opportunity and danger. In Cesare's world, they were indeed inseparable. A knock interrupted my thoughts. Violetta entered, carrying an armload of clothing. Mr. Lombardi sent these. Says you'll need appropriate attire for meetings starting tomorrow. She laid out the garments, tailored pantsuits in charcoal and navy, silk blouses, a leather portfolio, even shoes that looked expensive enough to make me wince. Everything was in my size, chosen with an eye for professional elegance without ostentation. He notices everything, Violetta said, smoothing a jacket. Always has, even when he pretends not to. 4 years you worked here, and he knew your size, your preferences, probably your shoe width. That's unsettling. That's survival in his world. He has to know everything about everyone, has to see threats before they materialize. She turned to me, her stern face softening. But Octavia, be careful. You're not just an employee anymore. You're in his inner circle, and that's a dangerous place to be. I know. Do you? Do you really understand what it means when Cesare Lombardi trusts someone? She moved closer, lowering her voice. I've been here 20 years. I've seen people elevated to his confidence, and I've seen what happens when that trust is betrayed. The bodies don't always turn up, but the people certainly disappear. A chill ran through me. I won't betray him. I believe you mean that. But intentions and actions aren't always aligned, especially when things get complicated. Her gaze was knowing. And things always get complicated when a man like him starts looking at a woman the way he's been looking at you. Heat flooded my cheeks. He sees me as a useful asset, nothing more. If you believe that, you're not as observant as I thought. Violetta patted my arm. Just remember, in his world, personal feelings are leverage, for you and against you. Be smart about which you let show. After she left, I stood before the mirror in one of the new suits. The transformation was startling. Gone was the invisible maid in her shapeless uniform. In her place stood someone who looked like she belonged in boardrooms, who could stand beside Cesare Lombardi without seeming out of place. The woman in the mirror was a stranger. I wasn't sure if that thrilled me or terrified me. The next morning brought my first official day as Cesare's personal assistant. I arrived at his study at 8 sharp, portfolio in hand, heart hammering despite my composed exterior. He looked up from his desk, and something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe, or appreciation. Ottavia. The clothes fit well. Thank you for providing them, sir. Cesare, I corrected at his raised eyebrow. Sit. We have work to do. He gestured to the chair across from him. First order of business. We're having the Chen brothers followed. I want to know who they meet, where they go, what they discuss. Stefano's coordinating the surveillance. I opened my portfolio, taking notes. And Sarah Petrov? I'm offering her the position. She starts tomorrow. I looked up sharply. You're hiring her? Even knowing she's likely working for the conspirators? Especially knowing that. We control what she sees, what information she has access to, and we watch who she reports to. His smile was cold. Keep your friends close and your enemies closer. She'll lead us right to the rest of them. Over the next 3 days, I learned the rhythms of Cesare's operation. Morning meetings with his captains, reviewing territory reports and resolving disputes. Afternoons managing the legitimate businesses, construction, import, export, the restaurant chain that served as a front for money laundering. Evenings dealing with the less legitimate ventures, the ones that operated in shadows and required careful coordination. I sat in on every meeting, took notes, asked questions when something didn't make sense. The captains were wary of me at first, this nobody who'd suddenly been elevated to the boss's right hand. But Cesare made it clear I spoke with his authority, and gradually they accepted my presence. You're good at this, Stefano said after one particularly contentious meeting about dock territory. Most people would have been lost 10 minutes in. You tracked every argument, caught the lies before I did. I've been listening to these conversations for 4 years, I reminded him. I just wasn't allowed to participate before. Sarah Petrov started on Wednesday. I was tasked with orienting her, showing her the office, explaining Cesare's preferences and procedures. She was pleasant, professional, asking intelligent questions without prying too obviously. But I watched her eyes, saw how they cataloged every detail, every person she met, every door and hallway. She was gathering intelligence, building a map of the organization. Your boss seems to trust you a great deal, she observed at one point. It's unusual for someone so young to have such access. I've worked here for 4 years. I've earned that trust. Of course, I just meant, most organizations like this, family businesses, they keep outsiders at arm's length. You must have proven yourself remarkably valuable. The subtle probing was expertly done. I deflected with a smile. I pay attention. That's valuable in any organization. That evening, I reported the conversation to Cesare. She's fishing for information about me, trying to understand how I fit into your structure. Did you give her anything useful? Just that I've been here 4 years and I'm observant. Nothing about the contract or Greco's death. Good. He was reviewing surveillance photos from the Chen brothers' tail. Thomas Chen met with Carmine DeLuca this afternoon. 40 minutes at a coffee shop in Greektown. We have audio. He pressed play on a recording device. The audio was muffled but clear enough. Thomas Chen's voice. Getting nervous. The Petrov woman was supposed to have moved by now, but he's keeping her close, watching her. Something's wrong. DeLuca's reply. Patience. Lombardi's paranoid, yes, but he's also predictable. He'll give her access eventually. Then we move. And if he doesn't, if he suspects, then we go to plan B, the Ricci woman. My blood ran cold. Cesare stopped the recording, his expression dark. Plan B. You. They're planning something that involves you specifically. What could they possibly... Understanding dawned. The frame-up. They're going to try to make it look like I'm working for them, that I've been their inside person all along, which would destroy your credibility, make anything you've told me suspect. Cesare stood, pacing. It's clever. If they can't use Petrov to get information, they'll use you to discredit the information we already have. How do we stop them? By beating them to it, by having you publicly, obviously, undeniably on my side before they can make their move. He turned to me, his expression intense. I need you to trust me completely for what comes next. Can you do that? The question felt weighted with significance beyond the immediate conspiracy. Yes. Good. Because tomorrow, you and I are going to make a very public appearance together. Somewhere the entire organization will see, will understand that you're under my direct protection, that anyone who moves against you moves against me. The next evening, Cesare announced a mandatory meeting of all captains and their lieutenants. The gathering was held in the warehouse on the east side, a cavernous space usually used for shipping, but cleared tonight for what amounted to a show of force. I arrived with Cesare, walking at his side rather than trailing behind. The message was clear. I wasn't staff anymore, wasn't background. I was visible, acknowledged under his wing. 50 men filled the warehouse, their conversations dying as we entered. Cesare led me to the raised platform at the front, and for the first time since this had all begun, I felt the weight of those eyes on me, assessing, questioning, judging. Gentlemen, Cesare's voice carried across the space. I'm sure you've all heard by now about Greco's unfortunate death and the discovery of certain irregularities in the contracts he'd prepared. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Cesare let them build, then raised a hand for silence. What you may not know is that those irregularities were caught by someone in my own household. Someone who has worked for me quietly for 4 years, who has proven both her intelligence and her loyalty. He gestured to me. Ottavia Ricci, my new personal assistant. The announcement sent a wave of surprise through the assembly. I saw Stefano nod approvingly, saw Giovanni smile. But I also saw faces that hardened with calculation, eyes that studied me with new interest and new threat. Miss Ricci's sharp eyes saved us from a conspiracy that could have destroyed everything we've built, Cesare continued. And in recognition of her service, I'm making it clear to everyone here. She is under my direct protection. She speaks with my authority, and anyone who threatens her answers to me. The declaration hung in the air, absolute and unmistakable. It was protection, yes, but also a target painted on my back. Everyone in the organization now knew I was important to Cesare, which made me valuable as a pawn or a pressure point. After the meeting, as people filed out, I caught sight of Carmine DeLuca watching me from across the warehouse. His expression was unreadable, but the intensity of his stare made my skin crawl. He knows now, I murmured to Cesare. Let him know. Let them all know. Cesare's hand settled at the small of my back, possessive and protective. You're in the open now. Ottavia. No more invisibility, no more hiding. They'll come for you, eventually. But when they do, we'll be ready. The surveillance on the Chen brothers intensified. Thomas Chen met with DeLuca again, this time joined by Councilman Torres and 2 others from our list. The audio from that meeting was damning. Lombardi's made his move. DeLuca's voice. He's elevated the Ricci woman, made her untouchable. We can't frame her now, not without it looking like we're attacking his inner circle. Torres. Then we need to adjust. Remove her from the equation entirely. A chill ran through me as I listened to them calmly discuss my removal. They're planning to kill me. Cesare's expression was granite. No. They're planning to try. There's a difference. He turned to Stefano. I want 3 men on Ottavia at all times. I want her mother's building locked down, and I want surveillance on every person in that meeting. Cars, homes, offices. I want to know when they breathe. Boss, that's a lot of resources. I don't care. Do it. The steel in his voice brooked no argument. Over the next week, I learned to live with constant security. 3 guards in rotation, always within sight. My mother's building had 2 men stationed outside at all times. I couldn't go anywhere without an escort, couldn't make a move without it being coordinated and cleared. It was suffocating and necessary in equal measure. Sarah Petrov, meanwhile, was proving useful in unexpected ways. She'd been drafting new consolidation contracts, legitimate ones without hidden traps. Her work was impeccable, thorough, exactly what Cesare needed to move forward with his business expansion. I don't think she knows about the conspiracy, I said to Cesare one evening. We'd fallen into a routine of late-night strategy sessions in his study, just the 2 of us reviewing the day's intelligence. She's too good at her job, too invested in getting things right. She's not sabotaging anything. You think she's clean? I think whoever told the conspirators about her wasn't telling the truth. Maybe they wanted us to suspect her, to distrust our own lawyer, to create chaos from within. Cesare considered this. Richard Chen recommended her, and Richard Chen's brother was feeding information to DeLuca. What if the whole thing was misdirection? Make us paranoid about our lawyer while they planned something else. Then what's the real play? I thought about it, running through everything we'd learned, every conversation we'd overheard. My mother. They mentioned Plan B involving me. What if Plan B is about leverage, threatening her to force me to do something? The thought had barely formed when Cesare's phone rang. Stefano's name on the screen. Cesare answered, listened, his face draining of color. When? How many? Okay, lock it down. I'm on my way. He ended the call, his eyes meeting mine with an expression I'd never seen before. Fear. Your mother's building. 3 armed men tried to breach the lobby. My security stopped them, but I was already on my feet, reaching for my coat. I need to see her. I need to make sure she's safe. Ottavia, it's too dangerous. I don't care. She's my mother. My voice broke. This is happening because of me, because I spoke up, because I became visible. The least I can do is make sure she's protected. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded. Okay. But we go together, and we go prepared. The drive to Riverside was tense, 2 SUVs full of armed men escorting us. My mother's building looked the same from outside, but I could see the additional security now, men posted at every entrance, cars parked strategically on the street. My mother met us at her apartment door, her face pale but composed. Ottavia, and Mr. Lombardi, this is unexpected. Mom, are you okay? Did they hurt you? I'm fine. Your friends downstairs were very efficient. She looked past me to Cesare. Though I'd like to know why armed men are trying to break into my building, and why other armed men are apparently living in my lobby. Because your daughter is very important to me, Cesare said simply. And my enemies have decided to use you to hurt her. I apologize for bringing this trouble to your door. My mother's eyes narrowed, assessing him with the same sharp observation I'd inherited from her. My daughter said she got promoted because she caught an error in a contract. She did. An error that would have cost me everything. She saved my organization, Mrs. Ricci. I owe her a debt I can never fully repay. And that debt includes putting her in danger? No. That danger existed whether she spoke up or not. I just didn't see it until she forced me to look. Cesare's voice was steady, respectful. But I promise you I will protect her with everything I have. And I will protect you because you're important to her. My mother looked between us, seeing something I wasn't ready to acknowledge. I see. Well then, Mr. Lombardi. I hope you're as good at protecting people as you are at making enemies. I am, ma'am. I promise you that. Before we left, I pulled my mother aside. I'm sorry for all of this. I never meant... Shh. She cupped my face in her hands. You did what you thought was right. That's all any of us can do. But Ottavia... Her voice dropped. That man, he looks at you like you're more than just an employee. Be careful. In his world, affection is both shield and weapon. I know, Mom. Do you? Because I see the way you look at him, too. Her words followed me back to the mansion, echoing in the silence of the SUV. The way I looked at Cesare. What exactly had she seen that I'd been trying not to see in myself? Back at the mansion, Cesare called an emergency meeting of his inner circle. Stefano, Giovanni, and now me. We gathered in the study, the door locked, the curtains drawn. They've escalated, Cesare said without preamble. Attempted abduction of Ottavia's mother means they're desperate, willing to cross lines we thought were sacred. Family was supposed to be off limits. They're not family people, Stefano said grimly. They're opportunists who saw a chance at power and took it. Honor doesn't factor in. Then we respond in kind. Cesare's voice was cold. I want everyone on that list brought in, tonight. We'll hold them here, in the wine cellar, until they tell us everything. Who else is involved? What else they've planned? How deep this goes? Boss, that's 15 people, Giovanni protested. A coordinated grab like that, it'll look like war. It is war. They just fired the first real shot by going after Ottavia's mother. Now we end it. He turned to me. I need you to sit this part out. What comes next? No. I stood, surprising myself with my vehemence. You said I was your eyes and mind. You need me in that room, listening, observing. I'll see things you might miss, catch lies before they're fully formed. Ottavia, what we do to make people talk. I know what you do. I've cleaned enough rooms in this house to understand. I met his gaze steadily. I'm not asking to participate in violence, but I want to be there, to help you get the truth. These people tried to hurt my mother. I have a right to see justice done. Something in my words reached him. He nodded slowly. Okay, but you stay in the observation room, behind the glass. You watch and you listen, and if it gets too much, you leave. Understood. Understood. The operation went down at 3 a.m. Coordinated teams hit 15 locations simultaneously, extracting targets with brutal efficiency. By dawn, the wine cellar held 14 men. De Luca had managed to flee, but everyone else was accounted for. I stood in the observation room, watching through one-way glass as Cesare entered the cellar. The men were secured to chairs, arranged in a circle like some dark parody of a business meeting. Gentlemen, Cesare's voice echoed in the space. I think we need to have a conversation about loyalty, about ambition, and about the consequences of betrayal. What followed was methodical, calculated, terrifying in its precision. Cesare didn't resort to immediate violence. Instead, he simply talked to each man, laying out what he knew, showing them the evidence we'd gathered, the modified contracts, the surveillance recordings. The paper trail that connected them all. I gave you everything, he said to Carmine DeLuca's empty chair, since the man had escaped. I brought you into the family, taught you the business, trusted you with responsibility, and you repaid that by conspiring to steal my empire. To Torres, you swore an oath when you took my money, protected you from investigations, from rivals, from your own stupidity, and you used that protection to plot against me. To Richard Chen, you sent your brother into my home as a spy. Family should be sacred, and you weaponized yours against mine. One by one, he confronted them with their betrayal. And one by one, they broke. Not from violence, though the threat of it hung heavy in the air, but from the simple, devastating truth of what they'd done and been caught doing. I watched it all, taking notes, marking who confessed quickly, who held out, who tried to bargain. By the time the sun rose, we had a complete picture of the conspiracy. 23 people total, including some we hadn't suspected. The final name made both Cesare and me freeze. Sarah Petrov was working for the FBI. Richard Chen confessed, his voice hoarse. Not for us. We didn't know until after she was hired. DeLuca found out, was going to expose her, use it against Lombardi. Cesare's face went stone cold. Where is DeLuca now? I don't know, I swear. He ran as soon as he heard about the arrests. I left the observation room and found Cesare in the hallway. Sarah Petrov. FBI? It makes sense now. The background gaps, the careful questions. She wasn't investigating me. She was building a case. His expression was unreadable. The question is whether she knows anything about the conspiracy, or if she's just been doing her job, blind to the coup happening around her. We need to bring her in, I said. Either she's compromised and dangerous, or she's a potential asset we haven't fully utilized. Your instinct? I thought about the woman I'd been working with, her thoroughness, her integrity. I think she's clean. I think she's exactly what she appears to be, a federal agent doing her job, oblivious to the conspiracy because she's focused on building a legitimate case. Then we bring her in carefully. No threats, no violence, just a conversation. He pulled out his phone. But we do it now, before DeLuca can get to her. As we walked back through the mansion toward his study, Cesare caught my arm gently. You've been awake for 24 hours. You need rest. So do you. I'm used to it. So am I. I met his gaze. We're close, Cesare. So close to ending this. I can rest when it's done. He studied my face, and I saw something shift in his expression. A softening, a warmth that had nothing to do with strategy or business. You're remarkable, you know that? A week ago you were invisible. Now you're indispensable. A week ago, you didn't know you needed me. I think I always needed you. I just didn't know where to look. His hand was still on my arm, his touch warm through the fabric of my sleeve. Ottavia, when this is over, when we've dealt with DeLuca and secured everything... His phone rang, shattering the moment. He answered with a curse, listened, his face going hard. Where? How long ago? Lock it down. We're on our way. He ended the call, already moving. Sarah Petrov's apartment. Someone got there before us. We arrived to find chaos. Federal agents everywhere. Crime scene tape. The building evacuated. An FBI agent I didn't recognize approached us, her badge prominently displayed. Mr. Lombardi, we need you to come with us, now. On what grounds? On the grounds that your employee, Sarah Petrov, was found dead in her apartment 30 minutes ago. And early evidence suggests she was killed by someone with access to your organization's methods and resources. The trap had been sprung, not on me, but on Cesare himself. And somewhere, Carmine DeLuca was watching his final play unfold. The FBI interrogation room was designed to intimidate, Harsh fluorescent lights, a metal table bolted to the floor, cameras in every corner. I sat beside Cesare, our attorney, legitimate this time, on his other side, facing two federal agents whose expressions revealed nothing. "Let's go over this again," Agent Morrison said, her voice professionally neutral. "You're telling me that Sarah Petrov, your employee, was actually an undercover FBI agent, and you had no idea?" "That's correct," Cesare replied, his tone as neutral as hers. "She was hired 3 weeks ago based on her credentials and references. I had no reason to suspect she was anything other than what she claimed. And yet she ends up dead, killed in a manner consistent with organized crime executions. 2 shots to the back of the head, professional, clean." Morrison leaned forward. "You see how that looks, Mr. Lombardi. An FBI agent infiltrates your organization, and within weeks she's executed." "I see how you want it to look," Cesare countered. "But consider an alternative. Someone wanted to make it look like I killed a federal agent. Someone who knew about her real identity, and used it to frame me." Agent Harrison, Morrison's partner, spoke for the first time. Who would have that knowledge and that motivation? This was the moment we'd prepared for. Cesare slid a folder across the table. 15 men, all former associates, all involved in a conspiracy to take over my organization. We discovered the plot 3 weeks ago, and we've been quietly investigating. Several of them were arrested last night. Morrison opened the folder, her eyes widening as she scanned the contents. The modified contracts, the surveillance recordings, the confessions we'd obtained. "You were running your own investigation?" "Would you have believed me if I'd come to you 3 weeks ago claiming a massive conspiracy involving city officials and union leaders?" Cesare's voice was dry. I needed proof before anyone would take it seriously. "And Sarah Petrov's involvement?" "She wasn't involved, as far as we can determine. She was a good lawyer doing good work. We think she was killed by Carmine DeLuca, the one conspirator who escaped arrest, precisely to frame me and derail the investigation." The agents exchanged glances. Harrison spoke. "You have evidence of this?" I pushed forward my own notes. "I've documented every interaction we've had with the conspirators over the past 3 weeks. Times, dates, witnesses. Sarah Petrov's name appears nowhere in the conspiracy materials. She was clean." Morrison studied my notes with growing interest. "And you are?" "Ottavia Ricci, personal assistant to Mr. Lombardi." "The one who caught the original contract error?" "Yes, ma'am." "Tell me about that." For the next hour, I walked them through everything. The dinner, the modified contract, the moment I'd recognized the trap. I showed them my language skills, my memory for detail, my years of observation. By the end, both agents looked thoughtful. "This is a hell of a story," Morrison said finally. "And if it's true, it means we've got a bigger problem than one dead agent. It means we've got systemic corruption throughout the city government." "We've suspected it for months," Harrison admitted. "But we couldn't prove it, couldn't get close enough to the inner workings. Petrov was supposed to be our way in." "She was," Cesare said quietly, "just not in the way you planned. Her death is a message to me and to you, that DeLuca and whoever's backing him are willing to kill federal agents to protect their conspiracy." Morrison's face hardened. "Then let's work together. You give us everything you've found. We'll give you the resources of the FBI. And together, we'll bring down everyone involved." It was an alliance neither of us had expected, but one that made strategic sense. Over the next 2 weeks, Cesare's organization and the FBI worked in unprecedented coordination. The men in the wine cellar were transferred to federal custody in exchange for their cooperation. Warrants were issued for the remaining conspirators. And slowly, meticulously, we built an ironclad case. But Carmine DeLuca remained in the wind. "He's had 2 weeks to run," Stefano reported at our daily briefing. "Could be anywhere by now. Mexico, Europe, South America. No, I said, studying the map of his known properties and associates. He's still here, in the city. Everyone turned to look at me. Cesare leaned forward. What makes you say that? Because De Luca is sentimental. I remember conversations I overheard over the years. He talked about Detroit like it was his birthright, like he deserved to rule it. He won't run until he's absolutely certain he's lost. I pointed to the map. And he hasn't lost yet. Sarah Petrov's death gave him exactly what he wanted. Chaos, suspicion, FBI resources diverted to investigating you instead of hunting him. So, where would he hide? I thought about what I knew of De Luca, the patterns I'd observed. Somewhere meaningful. Somewhere he can watch things unfold, see if his plan works. His family's old house, Cesare said suddenly. His father's place, where he grew up. We assumed it was abandoned after his father died, but what if it's not? I finished. What if he kept it, maintained it in secret, as a bolt hole? Stefano was already pulling up property records. It's in his mother's name, technically. House in Corktown. Been vacant for 3 years, according to tax records. But is it really vacant? I asked. Or just made to look that way? The FBI raid on the Corktown house happened at dawn. I wasn't there. Cesare had forbidden it, and this time I'd accepted his judgment. But I listened over the radio as the operation unfolded. We've got movement inside. 3 heat signatures. Breach, breach, breach. The sounds of shouting, breaking glass, chaos, then silence. Finally. All targets secured. De Luca is in custody. Relief flooded through me. It was over. Finally. Truly over. Cesare pulled me into his study as soon as he heard the news. You did it, he said, something like wonder in his voice. Your insight, your memory, your instinct. You found him when no one else could. We found him. All of us working together. No, you found him. Don't diminish that. He moved closer, and I was suddenly acutely aware of how alone we were, how the early morning light slanted through the windows, casting everything in gold. Cesare. Do you know what you've done, Ottavia? You didn't just save my empire. You exposed corruption that's infected this city for decades. You brought down a conspiracy that could have reshaped organized crime across the Midwest. You did that. I read a contract. Everything else just followed. You saw what no one else saw. You spoke when you could have stayed silent. You chose courage when safety was easier. His hand came up to touch my face, gentle, almost reverent. You changed everything. My breath caught. I should go, check on my mother, make sure she knows it's safe now. Ottavia. The way he said my name made me pause. I need to tell you something. Before this moment passes, before we both pretend this is still just professional, just business. Don't. I stepped back, fear and longing warring inside me. Don't say what I think you're going to say. Why not? Because I'm still just the maid who got lucky. Because you're Cesare Lombardi and You're the woman who saved my life, who changed my organization, who made me see the world differently. He closed the distance I'd tried to create. You're the smartest person I've ever met. You're brave and principled and remarkable. And yes, I have feelings for you. Feelings I've been trying to ignore because I know how complicated they make everything. My heart hammered against my ribs. What kind of feelings? The kind that make me want to keep you close. The kind that make your safety more important than my empire. The kind that... He broke off, searching my face. The kind I haven't let myself feel in years, because they make you vulnerable. And vulnerable men don't survive long in my world. I don't know how to do this, I whispered. I don't know how to be in your world, how to be what you need. You're already what I need. You have been since the moment you spoke up. His hand was still on my face, his thumb tracing my cheekbone. The question is whether you can let yourself want this too. Want me, despite everything I am, everything you know about me. I thought about the past 3 weeks, about the person I'd become in his orbit, the invisible maid who'd found her voice, her power, her place. And I thought about him, not the fearsome mob boss the city whispered about, but the man who'd listened to my ideas, who'd protected my mother, who'd looked at me like I was valuable, essential, seen. I do want this, I admitted, the truth both terrifying and liberating. I want you, despite everything, because of everything. But Cesare, but what? We need to be smart about this, about us, your world, your enemies. If they knew you cared about me beyond professional respect, it would make me the biggest target imaginable. He smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his usually guarded face. So we're careful, we're patient. We build something real in the spaces between business, in the quiet moments no one else sees. His forehead touched mine. I can do careful, Atavia. I've been doing careful my entire life. But I can't do empty anymore. Not after knowing what it's like to have someone who truly understands me. The kiss, when it came, was gentle. A question more than a demand. A promise more than a claim. I answered it. Let myself fall into the moment, into the impossibility of us. When we finally drew apart, both breathing harder, Cesare's smile was almost boyish. I've been wanting to do that since you interrupted my dinner party. Liar. You wanted to fire me for speaking out of turn. I wanted to understand you. The wanting to kiss you came later. He stepped back, professional distance reasserting itself even as his eyes remained warm. We should probably maintain plausible deniability for a while, until the FBI investigation concludes, until everything settles. Agreed. In public, we're just boss and employee. In private, we figure out what this is. Together. Over the next month, the conspiracy unraveled completely. DeLuca and all the co-conspirators were prosecuted, their cases strengthened by the evidence we'd gathered and the testimony they provided against each other. City officials resigned, union leaders were indicted, and the FBI launched a task force to root out the remaining corruption. Cesare's legitimate businesses expanded with the vacuum left by the conspiracy's collapse. The illegal operations, well, those were carefully disentangled from the legitimate ones and gradually phased out. Not eliminated entirely. I was realistic about who Cesare was, but reduced, made safer, operated with the kind of strategic care that reduced violence and risk. My role evolved too. Officially, I was his chief of staff, a legitimate position that explained my access and authority. Unofficially, I was still his eyes and mind, the person who saw patterns and prevented problems before they fully formed. And in the quiet moments between meetings, in the late nights working together in his study, we built something neither of us had expected. A partnership that was both professional and personal, both strategic and tender. You've changed my whole operation, Cesare said one evening, 6 weeks after DeLuca's arrest. We were alone in his study, reviewing plans for a new legitimate venture. Cleaned up the accounts, reorganized the hierarchy, made everything more efficient and less violent. That was always possible. You just needed someone to show you how. I needed you. He pulled me closer, the papers forgotten. Question is, how long until you realize you could do all this without me? That you're brilliant enough to run your own empire? I laughed. I have no desire to run an empire. I like being the power behind the throne, not on it. Good. Because I'm not letting you go. Ever. The possessiveness in his voice should have worried me. Instead, it sent a thrill through me, Promises, promises. I keep my word, Ottavia. Always. His expression grew serious. Which is why I need to ask you something important. He pulled back, reaching into his desk drawer to extract a small velvet box. My heart stuttered. I know this is complicated, he began. I know we've only been together a short time, but I also know that I don't want to do any of this without you. The business, the future, any of it. You make me better, Ottavia. You make all of it mean something beyond power and control. He opened the box, revealing a ring. Elegant, understated, exactly what I would have chosen if asked. This isn't about possession or control. It's about partnership, about building something together. Will you marry me? I stared at the ring, at him, at the future he was offering. A month ago, I would have called this impossible. Now, yes. The word emerged with absolute certainty. Yes, I'll marry you. As he slipped the ring onto my finger, as I kissed him with all the pent-up emotion of the past weeks, I thought about how far I'd come from invisible maid to indispensable partner. How a single decision to speak up had changed everything. What are you thinking? Cesare asked, noting my expression. That I'm grateful I paid attention all those years, that I learned to see what others missed. I smiled. And that I'm very glad you forgot to read that contract carefully. He laughed, the sound genuine and free. Best mistake I ever made. Or rather, best mistake Greco ever tried to make me make. We settled back into working, but now with my hand in his, the ring catching the light. Outside, the city sprawled beneath us. Our city now, in a way it had never been before. Not because we controlled it through fear, but because we'd fought to make it better, cleaner, safer. It wasn't perfect. We weren't perfect. But we were partners, in business and in life. And that, I thought, was more than enough. The wedding was small, private, a deliberate choice to keep it away from the public eye and the speculation that would have followed. Just family and the inner circle, held at a small chapel outside the city, where the priest asked no questions, and the guests understood discretion. My mother stood beside me, tears in her eyes as she adjusted my simple white dress. Are you sure about this, mija? More sure than I've been about anything. He's a complicated man, a dangerous man. I know, but he's also loyal, protective, and underneath all the power and control, he's decent. I met her eyes in the mirror, and he loves me, Mom. Really loves me. Not who he needs me to be. She kissed my cheek. Then I'm happy for you. But Ottavia, don't lose yourself in his world. Remember who you were before all this, the woman who saw clearly and spoke truthfully. I won't forget. That's who he fell in love with. The ceremony was brief but meaningful. When Cesare slipped the wedding band onto my finger, his hand trembled slightly, the only outward sign of emotion from a man who'd built an empire on control. You're mine now, he whispered as we kissed, and I'm yours. Equal partners in everything. Equal partners, I agreed. The reception was held at the mansion, and for the first time, I wasn't serving or cleaning. I was the guest of honor, the new Mrs. Lombardi, the woman who'd gone from invisible to indispensable in the space of a few extraordinary weeks. Stefano raised his glass in a toast. To the boss and his bride. May they continue to prove that the best partnerships are built on mutual respect, strategic thinking, and the occasional willingness to ignore bad advice from people like me. Laughter rippled through the gathering. I caught Violetta's eye across the room. She smiled, that rare, genuine expression that transformed her stern face. But the real moment came later, after the guests had departed and Cesare and I stood alone in his study, Our study now, he insisted. I have something for you, he said, pulling a folder from his desk. Wedding present. Inside were documents transferring ownership of the charitable foundation he'd mentioned weeks ago, the one his mother had started, the one that had languished without real oversight. It's yours now, he said, to run as you see fit. Use it for whatever causes matter to you. Full control, full authority. My only requirement is that you do good with it. I stared at the papers, understanding the magnitude of what he was offering. This is more than a wedding present. This is a purpose. You've always needed one. Cleaning was never enough for your mind, and being my assistant, while valuable, isn't enough either. This, he gestured to the documents. This gives you a platform to change things, to help people the way you helped me. I kissed him, pouring gratitude and love into the gesture. Thank you for seeing me, for trusting me, for giving me this. You earned it, every bit of it. He pulled me close. Now, shall we discuss the honeymoon I've planned, or would you rather spend our wedding night working? How long have you known me? Working, obviously. He laughed. I thought you might say that, which is why I've arranged for work we can do together, in a villa in Tuscany, where you can learn about the Italian side of the business, and I can finally teach you proper Italian instead of the version you picked up from dusting my papers. I speak fine Italian. You speak business Italian. You need to learn the poetry, the nuance, the parts you don't use in contract negotiations. Exactly. His expression grew tender. I want to give you everything, Atavia. Not just the foundation, not just partnership in the business. I want to give you the world I came from, the culture, the history. I want you to understand every part of me. I already understand the parts that matter. Humor me anyway. We spent our wedding night not in romantic isolation, but in his study, reviewing the foundation's assets and planning its future. It should have been unromantic, prosaic even. Instead, it felt perfect. Two minds working in harmony, building something that would outlast both of us. What's first? Cesare asked, reviewing my preliminary plans. Education programs, scholarships for kids in neighborhoods like the one I grew up in, where talent gets overlooked because of zip codes. I pointed to another section. And legal aid, helping people understand their rights, navigate systems designed to keep them powerless. You're going to make real enemies with this, the kind who profit from keeping people uneducated and uninformed. Good, let them come. I've already faced down one conspiracy. I'm not afraid of bureaucrats and profiteers. He smiled, pride evident in his eyes. That's my wife. Fearless. Not fearless, just determined. I set down my pen, moving to stand by the window overlooking the grounds. Cesare, can I ask you something? Anything? Do you ever regret it? The life you've built? The compromises you've made? He was quiet for a long moment, considering the question with the seriousness it deserved. I regret the violence. I regret the people who got hurt. The moral lines I crossed. He joined me at the window. But I don't regret building something that matters, that employs thousands, that gives people opportunity they wouldn't have otherwise. The legitimate businesses, the protection I offer, those things are real, valuable. And the illegitimate parts? I'm working on that, phasing out the worst of it, transitioning to operations that don't require hurting people. It won't happen overnight, but it's happening. He turned to face me. You've shown me it's possible to have power without constant violence. I'm trying to live up to that vision. I'm not asking you to change who you are. I know. But you make me want to be better anyway. He took my hand, the one wearing his rings. That's love, isn't it? Wanting to be worthy of the person who sees all of you and chooses you anyway. I suppose it is. The months that followed were a blur of activity. I launched the Foundation's first programs, navigating bureaucracy and resistance with the same observational skills that had served me as a maid. Cesare supported every initiative, using his influence to smooth obstacles and his resources to fund programs that mattered. "You've helped more people in 6 months than I have in 6 years," he said one evening, reviewing the Foundation's quarterly report. 300 scholarships awarded, legal clinics in 8 neighborhoods, job training programs that actually lead to employment. It's just the beginning. Next quarter, we're expanding the legal aid to include immigration services and housing advocacy. You're going to bankrupt me. Please. You made more this month from the construction division alone than the entire Foundation's annual budget. Fair point. He set aside the report. Speaking of construction, we've been approached about a development project downtown. Mixed use, residential, and retail. Could be good for the neighborhood, create jobs, improve property values. I knew that tone. But it would require displacing about 40 families currently living in the existing buildings. They're low income, mostly elderly. The developer's offering minimal relocation assistance. So, don't do it. It's not that simple. If we don't take the project, someone else will. Someone who will offer even less to the displaced residents. At least this way we can ensure they're treated fairly. I thought about it, seeing the moral complexity he navigated daily. What if we did it differently? What if we developed the property but built affordable housing as part of the project, and offered the current residents first right of refusal on the new apartments at their current rent rates? His eyes lit up. That could work. It would reduce our profit margin, but it would be right, and it would set a precedent for how development can happen without destroying communities. You're brilliant, you know that? I married well. It rubbed off. The downtown development became a model for the organization's new approach, profitable but principled, powerful but responsible. Other developers initially mocked the concessions we made to the displaced residents. But when the project proved successful, both financially and in terms of community relations, they started copying our model. "You're changing the industry," Cesare said, reviewing the latest press coverage. "Making gentrification less destructive, showing that profit and principle can coexist. We're changing it, together." But success bred its own challenges. The FBI investigation had concluded with convictions across the board, but it had also put a spotlight on Cesare's organization that hadn't existed before. New scrutiny, new pressure to conform to standards that didn't account for the complexity of his empire. "They want me to divest from the unions," he said one evening, frustration evident. "Claim it's a conflict of interest, that I have too much influence over labor negotiations." "Do you?" "Of course I do, but I use that influence to ensure fair wages, safe conditions, protection from corporate abuse. Without me, those workers would be at the mercy of people who see them as disposable." I saw the dilemma. "Then make it transparent. Create an independent board to oversee labor negotiations, include worker representatives. Make the whole process visible enough that the FBI can't claim impropriety. That would mean giving up direct control. It would mean maintaining influence through legitimate means, which is what we've been working toward all along." He studied me for a long moment. "When did you become the strategic one in this relationship?" "I've always been the strategic one. You're just finally noticing." The labor negotiations restructuring took months, but ultimately proved successful. The workers got stronger representation, the businesses maintained stability, and the FBI found no grounds for further investigation. It was a template we'd use repeatedly, taking areas of Cesare's empire that operated in gray zones and bringing them into the light. "You're killing my mystique," he complained with mock seriousness. "I used to be the fearsome mob boss. Now I'm the guy who sits on nonprofit boards and advocates for transparency. You're still fearsome when you need to be. You've just added legitimacy to your toolkit." "Thanks to you. Thanks to us. I couldn't do any of this without your resources, your connections, your willingness to evolve. A year into our marriage, we faced our first real test. A rival organization from Chicago, emboldened by the conspiracy's collapse and the subsequent scrutiny on Cesare's operations, began making moves into Detroit territory. Not with violence, they'd learned that lesson, but with political influence and economic pressure. They're undercutting our bids on city contracts, Stefano reported, offering lower rates, faster timelines. They've already taken 3 projects we were counting on. Legal competition, I noted. We can't respond with traditional methods. So what do we do? Cesare asked. Let them walk all over us? No, we beat them at their own game. I pulled up our financial records. We've reduced operational costs significantly over the past year by eliminating the violent enforcement mechanisms. That gives us margin to match or beat their bids on projects we actually want. And we leverage the foundation's reputation, show that our projects include community benefits, theirs don't. Using your nonprofit work as a competitive advantage? Using our values as a competitive advantage. Show the city that working with us means more than just construction. It means investment in neighborhoods, job training, housing stability. Make them choose between cheap bids and meaningful impact. The strategy worked. Detroit City Council, under new leadership after the conspiracy trials, appreciated the comprehensive approach. We didn't win every contract, but we won the ones that mattered, the ones that shaped neighborhoods and created lasting change. The Chicago organization is pulling back, Giovanni reported after 6 months of competition. They can't match our community investment without sacrificing their profit margins. They're refocusing on their home territory. Good. Cesare marked the territory map. Let them know that Detroit has new rules. You want to operate here? You operate responsibly. No more exploitation, no more violence, no more treating the city like it's something to be bled dry. I watched him deliver that message to the Chicago representatives during a tense negotiation meeting. Watched him wield power not through threats, but through economic reality and moral authority. This was the man I'd helped create. Still formidable, still commanding, but channeling his strength toward building rather than destroying. That night, alone in our bedroom, he pulled me close. I never thought it would be possible. What? This. Power without corruption. Influence without violence. A life that matters beyond money and control. His hand rested over my heart. You showed me it was possible. You made me believe I could be more than what my father was, more than what this city expected. You were always capable of this. I just helped you see it. No, you did more than that. You transformed everything. The business, the city, me. He kissed me softly. I love you, Ottavia. Not despite who you are, but because of it. Because you saw me clearly and chose me anyway. I love you too, and I'll keep choosing you, keep pushing you to be better as long as you'll let me. Forever, then. That's how long you're stuck with me. 2 years into our marriage, the foundation had grown beyond anything I'd imagined. Educational programs in 30 schools, legal clinics in 12 neighborhoods, job training that had placed over 1,000 people in stable employment. The model we'd created in Detroit was being studied in other cities, adapted and implemented by organizations looking to combine social services with community development. You've been invited to speak at the Urban Development Conference, Cesare said, showing me the invitation. They want you to present on the Detroit model, how we've integrated community benefit into private sector development. You should do it. It's your organization. It's our organization. And you're the one who designed the approach. You're the one who made it work. He set down the invitation. Besides, I'm more effective behind the scenes. You're the face people trust, the one who can articulate the vision without the baggage of my reputation. He was right. Despite the empire's transformation, Cesare Lombardi would always carry the weight of his past. But I could speak to the future we were building, could inspire others to try similar approaches in their own cities. The conference speech was terrifying and exhilarating. Standing before hundreds of urban planners, developers, and community activists, I laid out the Detroit model, how we'd transformed gentrification from displacement into development, how we'd used private sector resources to fund public benefit, how we'd proven that profit and principle could coexist. The applause was overwhelming. But more important were the conversations afterward, the city officials who wanted to implement similar programs, the developers willing to try a different approach, the community organizers who saw hope for protecting their neighborhoods without stopping development entirely. "You were magnificent," Cesare said that night, back in our hotel room. Powerful, persuasive, inspiring. I was terrified. "You hit it well." He pulled me onto the bed, his expression turning serious. "Ottavia, I've been thinking. The foundation needs to expand beyond Detroit. Other cities are asking for help, wanting to replicate what we've done. But that requires resources we don't currently have." "What are you proposing?" "Franchising the model, creating a national organization with local chapters, each operating independently but following the same principles. It would require significant investment, probably partners from outside my organization." I saw where he was going. "You want to go fully legitimate? Separate the foundation entirely from your other operations. Make it independent enough that it can grow without being tainted by association." "Yes, and I want you to run it, full-time, separate from my businesses. Your own empire, built on your own terms." The offer was both generous and strategic. It would give the foundation credibility it couldn't have while directly tied to a known, if reformed, criminal organization, and it would protect me from any remaining scrutiny of Cesare's operations. What about us? I'd be traveling constantly, building something separate. We'd still be partners, still married, still building a life together. But you'd have something that's entirely yours, that can't be taken away if anything happens to me. His voice dropped. "I'm not immortal, Ottavia, and I want to know that you'll be protected, that you'll have resources and independence, regardless of what happens to my empire." I understood what he wasn't saying, that enemies still existed, that his world remained dangerous despite all our reforms, that he needed to know I'd survive and thrive if something happened to him. "Okay, let's do it. Let's build something that outlasts both of us." The National Foundation launched 6 months later with partners from philanthropic organizations, community development groups, and socially conscious investors. I became its executive director, no longer just Mrs. Lombardi, but a recognized leader in urban development and community investment. Cesare continued transforming his own organization, gradually transitioning away from the remaining illegal operations, until what remained was a legitimate business empire. It took years, required patience and careful planning, but eventually, the Lombardi name became associated not with mob violence, but with responsible development and community investment. "Who would have thought," he said on our 5th anniversary, reviewing how far we'd come, "that the maid who caught a contract error would end up transforming an entire city's approach to development? Who would have thought that the fearsome mob boss would end up on the board of the Urban Planning Institute? I blame you entirely. I accept full responsibility." We stood together at the window of his study. Our study, our command center for both his business empire and my foundation work. Below, the city sprawled, transformed by the work we'd done together. Neighborhoods revitalized without displacement, businesses thriving with fair labor practices, communities strengthened by investment that valued people over profit. "Do you ever miss it?" I asked. "The old way, when you had absolute power, when fear was your primary tool?" He considered the question seriously. "Sometimes I miss the simplicity, the clarity of knowing exactly who your enemies were, exactly how to respond to threats." He turned to face me, But then I look at what we've built, at the lives we've changed, at the legacy we're creating, and I realize that this— He gestured to the city, to the foundation reports, to the evidence of our work. This is actual power. The kind that doesn't fade when you die, that doesn't depend on fear or violence. The kind that builds instead of destroys. Exactly. He pulled me close. You taught me that, Octavia. You showed me that the invisible people, the ones I'd overlooked, dismissed, underestimated, they were the ones with real power all along. The power to see clearly, to speak truthfully, to change things by simply refusing to accept them as they are. I was just a maid who read too much and paid too much attention. You were never just anything. You were exactly who I needed, arriving at exactly the right moment, seeing exactly what everyone else had missed. He kissed my forehead, including me, especially me. As we stood together, watching night fall over the city we'd helped transform, I thought about that evening 5 years ago, when I'd interrupted a dinner party to save a man I barely knew. How that single moment of courage had changed everything. My life, his empire, an entire city's future. No regrets? Cesare asked, seeming to read my thoughts. Not a single one. Even knowing everything you know now, all the complexity, all the compromise, all the difficulty of living between legitimate and the remnants of your past? No, because we're building something better. Together, and that's worth every complication. He smiled, that genuine expression I'd learned to cherish. Then let's keep building. Let's see how much more we can transform, how many more lives we can change, how far we can push this model of responsible power. Together, I agreed. Always together. And in that moment, standing in the study where I'd once been invisible and was now indispensable, where I'd transformed from servant to partner, from observer to architect of change, I understood that true power wasn't about domination or fear. It was about seeing clearly, speaking truthfully, and having the courage to act when action mattered most. It was about being visible when it counted, invisible when it served your purpose, and wise enough to know the difference. It was about partnership, trust, and the willingness to transform not just systems, but yourself. And it was about loving someone enough to help them become better while never losing yourself in the process. 5 years ago, I'd been a maid cleaning floors. Now I was building empires, not of fear and control, but of opportunity and hope. And I was just getting started.